Hello, hello. It's Thursday evening, so it must be time for a book reading with Karen. How you guys doing? I'm Karen Tripp. I'm the Executive Director of Cancer Companions, and I'm excited to be here to share with you the final section of the final chapter of my very first book that was ever published. It's called God is Bigger Than Your Cancer. And with this book, we've gone through 4 different chapters that had 4 different devotionals answering different questions that a lot of cancer patients end up having when coping with issues around God and their faith. Today, we're on chapter 4, and that chapter is I've prayed, so why am I still sick? Last week, we spent a little bit of time talking about a devotional that had to do with that idea of prayers that we pray so hard with all of our mind and with all of our faith that somehow or another doesn't work into the will of God. The answer comes back, not this time, my love, right? And so now I'm going to read you the story about a wonderful woman named Irene. First, I want to warn you is that Irene has had a wonderful little Southern accent. So if I start twanging as I'm reading this, please don't be surprised. That's me just bringing my roots of being raised on grits back, right? But I want to tell you a little bit more about how I met Irene. I did not know Irene before the book. A friend of a friend knew her very well and thought she was an amazing woman and so brave in the midst of her cancer walk and definitely wanted me to interview her for the book. And so I scheduled the appointment and I went over to the house and I knocked on the door at the time. She opened the door and she said, "Oh, you didn't get my message." And I'm like, "No, ma'am, I didn't. I mean, this is the first time I've met her." And she said, "Well, I ended up getting some bad news last night and I'm just not sure that I'm up for doing this interview today." And I said, "Well, that's fine. I absolutely understand. I'll get a hold of you another time and we'll do that." And then she stopped and she said, "No." She said, "Come on in." And I had one opportunity, one interview with Irene. She had ended up finding out the night before that her doctor had called and said that her cancer had spread from one lung to the other. And so all of the procedures that they had in mind for removing the cancer was gone at that time. So let's take a listen to Irene's story. Those of you that have been hanging around through these videos, you know that what I do is I take those interviews and the videotapes that I use during them and I transcribe them into a first-person narrative where basically it's their words telling their story. So let's go ahead and take a listen to Irene. "I found out last night that the cancer has spread to my other lung. But let's face it, after 22 years of battling cancer, who would have expected I'd hang in there this long? I'm not dead yet, so even if the doctors say we have no options, God will work his will. I just figured it's not done until he says it's done. And hopefully that will coincide with me hearing God say, 'Well done, good and faithful servant.'" In 1965, I was a 39-year-old nurse, diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer. I woke up one morning and there was a lump in my left breast about the size of my thumb. My doctor said, "This lump is nothing but a fluid-filled cyst." I don't put my knowledge above the doctor's, but I do take heed of my own opinion, research, and conclusions, and I know my own body. God was there to tell me to not let loose of my concerns. It was like I had an angel sitting on my shoulder saying, "Oh, I'm not done with this yet. You keep digging. You keep looking." With my persistence, my doctor recommended a surgeon who also said I didn't have a problem and he would check me again in 6 weeks. Well, at 5 weeks, the lump began to dimple, which is a serious sign of malignancy. When I went back, the surgeon said, "Removing this lump is a waste of your time and mine." At that point, I was really digging in my heels and I said I wanted out. Finally, he agreed. Afterwards, he came to my bedside and said, "Aren't we glad we got on this right away? It's malignant." I said, "Yes, we are. Aren't we sharp?" That was so Irene. So that experience taught me that the single best advocate for your health is you. No one is going to help you out and say, let me do this dying for you. I'm sorry I screwed up your diagnosis. I'll die, you live. The doctors just don't do that. When there is a mistake made and it comes to the dying, that has to be done. You're the one that does it. It's not always easy being your own advocate. In the 9 years between my initial diagnosis in 1985 and my 1994 recurrence, I had other lumps and bumps, and I insisted that each one be removed. The doctors were beginning to get critical of me. You can't jump at shadows. You can't live your life obsessed with cancer or in fear of cancer. They were implying that I was educated enough to be more professional. Well, there's nothing professional about having cancer. It's personal. In 1994, the symptoms of breast cancer began again, but the doctors wouldn't listen. The first symptom appeared in December when my left breast became much smaller than my right one. My oncologist said it was due to radiation, but then there was some oozing along the scar line in March. My surgeon did a needle biopsy, which was an 11% failure rate. After the biopsy came back benign, I acted really professional and did not cause a ruckus. But over the next months, I called my surgeon and my oncologist when the breast began to itch and flake, then ooze and bleed. Then the nipple began to tuck under and bleed all the time. In December, at my regular appointment, the doctor said, that's malignant and has to come out right now. I said, I've been telling you that for a year. They diagnosed me with stage 3B inflammatory breast cancer, which has a 5-year survival rate. That was difficult to hear because there are only 4 stages. With 3B, you're standing with one foot on the cliff and the other on a banana peel, and I don't like being there. So I immediately got 5, that's right, 5 second opinions. I told the 5 doctors that I was there to interview them for a job. I figured if they can't handle that kind of an approach, then maybe I didn't need them anyway. Now, that's not to say that's right for everybody. Some people would go screaming for the hills and say, I could never do that. But that's the way I needed to do it. They did a mastectomy on that right was mandatory. 6 years later, in 2000, I found a small lesion on my chest that looked like an age spot. For this one, the angel just didn't crawl on my shoulder. She screamed in my ear, "You're not done with this yet." My surgeon said, "It won't be anything, but I'll remove it in 2 weeks." I said, "I have something a little sooner in mind, like this afternoon. I'll climb up on the table and bring the butcher knife if you don't have one." When the doctor called with the results, she said, "Irene, I can't imagine what made you insist on having it removed. There's cancer under it." So that immediately put me at stage 4. I went through a very vigorous course of radiation to beat the cancer in 2002. Yet in 2004, a CT scan discovered lesions in my liver. Liver cancer was really frightening because you can't live without a liver, and there's only so much you can do without damaging it. My 2 liver surgeries to remove the right lobe in 2004 and 2005 didn't stop the spread. So my doctor pulled a rabbit out of his hat, and I had a special radiation procedure that killed the tumors in my liver. However, when I did the follow-up scan, they found cancer in my left lung. The last 2 years, I've spent searching for something that will work, but to no avail. After trying the latest drugs on the market, I went on a clinical trial but was unable to stay on. My bone marrow was too exhausted from all the chemo and radiation treatments over the years. They did scans last Monday and found out that it's in both my lungs and in scattered small nodules throughout my lungs. I'm on a hormone treatment now, but we're exhausting my options because I've become chemo resistant. I get the toxic effects, but not the beneficial effects of chemotherapy. We're hoping the hormone therapy will be effective, but beyond that, there isn't much out there for treatments. However, if it's out there to be found, I'm confident my doctor will find it. He has been a miracle worker to this point. But realistically, there is only so much medical science can do. So that's where we are right now. 22 years of dealing with this, and I feel very blessed to be here. When I was diagnosed at 39, I never thought I'd be here this long. Then some days I think, how did I get here so fast? With cancer, some people turn toward God and some turn away. For me, the worse things got, the more I understood that the struggles were a request from God to trust Him, to lean on Him. It was as though God said, surrender your trust to me. I have a plan. It's funny. On the one hand, God has taught me to fight for the care and treatment I need. On the other, He has taught me to submit. Submit, submit, submit. It's like, well, God, why did you give me free will if you wanted me to submit? But it's a different kind of submission. It's not something you give up. It's something you acquire. A couple of Lenten seasons ago, I decided I'd surrender my will to God, not just for Lent, but for all time. Usually I would give up something like chocolate. I told Jesus this time, surrendering to you is probably not going to work out for either of us because I'm such a micromanager. But this is a once and for all gift. It's hard to explain how wonderful surrender really is until you've experienced it. I don't worry about outcomes and decisions, and I pray for what I'd like to see happen. But I always say, your will be done and not mine. It's a daily discipline because I do have a tendency to have a hand in everything. If you can just keep from reaching out and grabbing on to that desire to be in control, and if you open your hand to Jesus instead of closing them, there'll be a huge release of tension. It'll create a lot of space in your life to appreciate the things around you instead of being caught up in the details. I will tell you that with this last diagnosis, there were some tears and some sadness. Still, God has put me in a place of spiritual trust. I think I know which way His plan is going, and I'm not too happy about that. Believe me, I've expressed my anger to God about it, but He has put me in such a place of peace that I don't think about my prognosis too much. I think about what I'm going to do that day. Am I going to work on one of my projects or go see my friends from church or maybe visit the grandkids? It all revolves around living in the moment. It took me years, and I mean years and years, just to learn to get into the moment. No one gets out of here alive. We're all going to walk this same path. That's not to say I don't fully believe in miracles and that they still happen all around us. I volunteered numerous times to Jesus to be on the miracle list, but I don't think that's what He has in mind for me. I think I'm supposed to be an example, a witness, that if we do love God and truly accept His plan for us, there will be times when that plan does not agree with our plan. That's when we return the love that He's shown us. I think there are a lot of different ways to approach dying. Some people get depressed, and that is that inescapable sadness of separating from those we love. But what could be so bad about an eternity of praising Jesus? So maybe He can use my life as an example to others in a way to live in joy with His love, trusting Him and His plans, even if it's not the answer to the prayer that I want. Maybe my life will even make it easier for someone else. Isn't she incredible? Let me close with this prayer. All-powerful God, if it is your will, Lord, heal me of this cancer. Remove any trace that cancer ever resided in my body. as a testimony to your mercy and graciousness. But if healing is not your will for me, let all the world know that you have not abandoned me, for you are carrying me through the fire to be with you always in heaven and on earth. Amen. Well, that's the end of the book, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for all of the encouragement that you guys have given me with everything that I've written. But there's just no question that all the amazing cancer survivors like Irene that I've met over the years are the ones that really get the true credit. I'm just listening. Thank you. Blessings. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye now.